what are we at, 19th? 19th, 2016 for Glazes 2. So we have now gotten through the Subtleties of Stull series. So, as with every class, there's always the boring part. Not that I find this part boring. I find that part to be extremely exciting. But it's the heavy lifting. All the pretty pictures come up in the next half. So you got that to look forward to starting on Thursday. But I would assume there's a lot of questions at this point. So I open the floor up to questions, or if you guys just want me to rant, just point me in a direction, and I shall rant. Anybody? Sue specifically? Anybody?
Well, I'm curious about how the amount of colorants you add to a glaze affects the durability.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about that.
I have a black glaze. What did you say?
I said we're not going to talk about that.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
Well, I have a black glaze that the UMF is great, but there's 9% iron and 2% cobalt. So I'm just wondering if that kind of throws off the UMF.
Oh, go ahead, Phyllis. You're gonna say something.
Well, just wondering because you say like if it's 0.3 to 0.7, then you should be good, and so I'm just wondering if you add lots of colorants, if durability can become an issue.
Right. For the most part, no. And I was only actually being slightly facetious when I say we're not going to talk about that. I'm more than willing to talk about it, but this comes up pretty extensively through the second half of the class because we'll talk about pretty much each individual colorant as it is. And as I said, that next Monday's lecture is literally just about iron. It's an entire lecture just on one colorant, and because it's such a big deal. So with iron, no. Because iron also functions as a flux. Okay, and we'll get into this in the iron talk. Because, and I mentioned this before, but what we've come to find, and it's not just what we've come to find in was it not today's lecture? I guess it was which lecture? Hold on, sorry, I'm looking at my lecture notes. I guess last week's. No, where is it? Where we talked about sort of low temperature cones, and I guess that was 2 weeks ago, and talking about how iron is really functioning, and this does go all the way back to, well, not Seeger. It goes back to somebody named Kramer, who developed the low temperature cones. Now, I'm not particularly a fan of the way that they accounted for the cones, because I'm fairly comfortable with the notion that we've come to now that if we account for iron as an alkaline earth, it works pretty well. And I don't have a great example showing that with iron, but I guess in what would be next Thursday's lecture, we will talk about this in reference to manganese. And manganese very definitely, I have a map that I've created using manganese as an RO flux, and it works just fine. Because it does play that role when it has when it's dominant, and it comes up in the context of, I mean, we were talking in the lecture, we'll talk about manganese specifically, but we really talk about it came from the notion of fake bronzes, if you've ever seen fake bronze glazes, where I had been sort of, I'm always toying around with any glaze. I'm getting really dramatic lighting here. Wow. I do have the sunset right outside my window. With the fake bronzes, I'm more than willing to look at the composition of any type of glaze. And so I was looking at the fake bronzes and sort of going, and we'll get into the whole formulas of them, but basically you look at these recipes and they've got 50% manganese, and it doesn't work from a UMF perspective, because what you would do is you'd have the clay and the feldspar and the silica, and that would generally be the formula, and then you would have 50% manganese in the colorant section of the segregated colorant section. And to me, I'm saying that doesn't work logically. So we started to look at manganese, and one of my students, Grant Akiyama, actually, he and I did the math, and we went and recreated Stahl with manganese as the flux, and it worked great. It worked exactly as you would expect Stahl to work. Obviously, they're highly colored because manganese has an inherent color to it. But manganese and iron are RO fluxes, and actually, and also is lead, the sort of one who shall not be named. Lead functions as an RO flux, and as I say, we don't really talk about lead, but we'll get to it. But the basics is that lead, I don't know from a UMF perspective because I really don't study it, but as best I can tell, that lead sort of works within the normal bounds, but everything automatically shifts down to 04, but that's a whole nother discussion. So, as to your question originally about considering colorants, for the most part, no. Now, when most glazes don't have a lot of material outside of the sort of normal bounds, iron is one exception. Iron, you will find glazes that have a lot of iron. Sometimes you'll find glazes with 5 or 6% manganese outside of this fake bronze. You know, stains are generally in 10% loadings, which is not a concern, and we get into what stains are and how they work and what concerns you should have with them in all the different types of stains. You know, the only colorants that are of concern that some people are concerned with would be copper. And again, this all comes up later. Technically, copper is toxic. Some people get pretty paranoid about it. Some people are pretty casual about it. Most of the time, we don't have functional glazes that are above 2 or 3% copper. You know, even the famous copper reds are 0.5% copper. There are sculptural glazes that go that high. You know, we will talk about when the Cone 04 section, we'll talk about glazes that have 7 and 8 and 9% copper. And that does have an effect. You get a color transition. Where's that damn tile? See, the problem is, have I showed you guys my tile rack in this lecture yet? I actually have 2 of these on my desk. Whenever I just whip a tile out, it's because this is on my desk. But it has 2 sides, and I have 2 of them. So I turn it around, and then there are even more tiles. So this is why I always have tiles to flash around at my desk. But where's the... Of course, but now I have to find the one specifically I'm looking for. No? Did I put it... Oh, here we go. Okay, so like this glaze is... So this is a copper glaze, and of course I'm getting really terrible light representation here. But it ran, and you get sort of a copper blue on top, where it's thin, so inherently low concentration. Then through here you get sort of a dark blue, where it's higher, and actually down at the bottom, again, this is terrible, and this image comes up later, but you get a straight up purple from just extreme amounts of copper concentration. So you do get those types of transitions. And copper is a flux. I mean, as we talked about, I think in Lecture 1, you know, we're talking about alkaline materials versus acidic materials versus amphoteric materials, that pretty much all of our fluxes, except for chrome being the big ones, are fluxes, so you get a lot of them and it has an effect. But you generally don't find functional glazes that have that much. You do find sculptural glazes. You know, chrome could be a concern with having extreme amounts, but most people don't put a lot of chrome in their glaze again. So to your specific question, no, I would not worry about a large percentage of iron. It's not uncommon to find oil spot glazes and I'm blanking on the other. What are the other high iron ones that I'm?
T-dust?
Say again? T-dust, yes, T-dust. Glazes that are high iron. And also some of the tomato reds will be high iron too. But because that actually incorporates itself into the glass matrix, it's actually less of a concern. And iron's not toxic. Again, this goes back to the conversation about what is toxic and what is of concern. Iron is inherently non-toxic. The materials that we have, that we still use, that could be considered toxic are really copper, chrome. Chrome becomes debatable because it's actually hexavalent chrome that is toxic, which is like when somebody says they chromed a trailer hitch or a bumper. That's hexavalent chrome, different valence of chrome. We're using chrome sesca oxide. So it's not really, but some people still get concerned. There are the toxicity issues with consuming raw barium, which we talked about barium. Did I put up my barium? I put up my barium right up on Blackboard, right? Did I do that? I did, right? Now I'm like questioning myself. Course documents. I don't know if I put up my barium right up. Phase 2 readings. If I didn't, I will put up my barium. Well, I'll put it up right now. The issue with barium is that raw barium is toxic when combined with stomach acid, and that's the real concern. Barium carbonate breaks down into barium chloride. Our stomachs are full of hydrochloric acid, and the hydrochloric acid turns into barium chloride, which is toxic, and so barium carbonate is used as rat poison. But barium in and of itself is of questionable toxicity. The body can expel it. It doesn't really have any effects as far as blood disorders or anything like that. It's really a question of eating raw barium, consuming raw barium. Hold on. I'm just searching for this. And so that was a long ramble to really not answer your question. No, I'm not concerned.
So when the barium is in the glaze, and it's barium carbonate,
yep,
then I'm assuming that the carbon and the oxygen all disappear in the form of carbon dioxide, maybe? And so then all that's left in the glaze matrix is the barium?
Right. You get barium, ties itself, it creates that non-bridging oxygen, and it bonds itself to the silicon molecules.
So it's just little barium by itself.
Right.
Or big barium in this case.
Big, yeah. Barium's a big
barium.
A big kid.
So then if you have the glaze being attacked by either an acid or a base, and that barium for some reason is released, what I'm understanding you to say is that not a health issue.
Generally not. I mean, you know, it's just another material that we consume all the time. You know, we consume barium sulfate in the form of a solution that we drink for having gastrointestinal X-rays. If you get barium, you know, the other things about barium, so I just put the write-up in the reading section. There's no evidence of it having any greater toxic issues. Barium carbonate is very slightly water soluble at such a low degree. We can't absorb it through our skin. Like I said, our blood can carry it and expel it. You know, our kidneys and livers will get rid of barium just fine. It's the main concern is the consumption of raw barium carbonate from the raw glaze. That is absolutely fatally toxic. The question of the consumption of any barium from a degraded glaze, it's not particularly regulated. There are no FDA regulations on barium. There are EPA watch lists on barium, which are, I think it's 50 parts per million. Don't quote me on that. It's in the write-up. But yeah, that documenting anything as far as the consumption of barium to that end is not well documented in any way or regulated in any way.
Okay. Well, the CDC didn't have a lot of terrible things to say about it.
No, they don't. And the only place where you find anything is the EPA, which has groundwater levels for barium. But the CDC or the FDA, nope, no. And you'll find copper and chrome often documented in those places, but you know, and it's one of those things of safety is always of a concern. You always want to make the most durable glazes possible. You know, it comes down to a question of what is toxicity. You know, we're consuming silica every day in various forms. You know, most of our vegetables have high silica content. calcium, strontium, and a lot of these are materials that we need to survive. So, of course, having a well-balanced, stable glaze is always your best friend. That's why I advocate that so strongly. And we started to talk about ion exchange and why glazes break down in the last couple of lectures, and it's a big deal. I think that is something that people are much too casual about because of the durability of their wear, just from a purely artistic standpoint of how their glazes perform, what the long-term durability of their glazes are, and you can correlate food safety to that. It's not something that I particularly focus on because I'm not particularly concerned with most of our materials. Vanadium concerns me, but manganese doesn't concern me, iron doesn't concern me, barium doesn't concern me, strontium doesn't concern me. That these concepts are very relative and regulation is very lax. Lead is a real concern. It's the reason why we don't talk about lead. I have had a friend who had lead poisoning, and she was a perfectly healthy 31-year-old woman who went into seizures because she worked in a stained glass window shop with lax health and safety procedures, and she got lead poisoning. Lead is an absolute concern. It's why I don't teach it. It's why I don't advocate for it. It's an amazing material. That's the problem at the end of the day. It's a super cool material. It just has serious health and safety consequences. The degradation of our material. That this is the Jello glaze that I talk about being attacked, and this is a high copper glaze relatively. So that's a concern. But it was just copper that was used in this glaze. But all those glazes that I showed that also failed durability testing, they're all an issue. Hold on. Oh, the baby's crying and my wife's tending the garden. Hold on. I have to see if he stops. Can you guys hear him? He's going to whimper. He's been high maintenance all day. His brother's at my parents' for the week, so.
Wait, are you in Holland?
No, I'm still at home. No, my eldest, we got a vacation week, so he's doing a grandparents' vacation for the week. But my parents don't want to take the baby, and I don't think my wife would give him up. No, we fly out Friday evening.
Ah.
So I'm going to get my son tomorrow, drop off our dog. They're going to take the dog for while we're gone, and then pack on Thursday. And he's really whimpering. It's blackmail. Those of you who don't have children understand. Children know how to blackmail you.
Are you the favorite parent at this point?
I am the go-to parent. I am the stay-at-home dad.
That's right.
And so I'm sure he hears me talking, and my wife tried to convince him to go to sleep early, but he's been a bully all day today. Babies are jerks. Let's be clear. They're cute, but they're total jerks, and they're ugly. Everybody acts like they're cute. Okay. Can you excuse me for a second? Talk amongst yourselves. I'm going to go give him his pacifier. This is Ezra, the jerk baby. I gave him his pacifier and laid him back down, and he instantly started whining again. So he's gonna hang out with me until. Who's that baby? This is either me being a great parent or a terrible teacher, so we'll see.
Well, my son went with me to law school for the first 6 months, so, you know, it's just you do what you got to do.
You do what you got to do. I know, but I'm going to hold your hand so you don't grab everything. You can grab the microphone. Okay. We're talking. Oh, the glaze durability. Yeah, I mean, the barium, you know, it's such a gray area. This is the problem. And a lot of people will teach paranoia, and I am not a fan of teaching paranoia. I'm a fan of teaching responsibility and teaching durable glaze formulas. You know, yes, that's the microphone. Boop. Would I be concerned with a durable glaze that you compose, that you fired yourself, as to the quality of it with barium? Not particularly. You know, in the same way that any glaze can be a concern. Okay, I'm putting you on the floor. I'm putting you in the baby bin. Uh-oh.
Yeah.
It's okay. My office just becomes a sort of whole room playpen. I just block off the entrance and exit, and then just let him play. Hold on. Okay. He's mobile. I have to unplug my headphones, so hopefully they don't die, because otherwise they'll grab the cable. Okay. So, question?
Well, I guess I'm just wondering how confident I can be about the durability, because there is a lot of paranoia out there, and there's a lot of people that say, oh, 10% iron, there's no way that's food safe, and all the chatter on the internet. So I just don't want, like, to have confidence where maybe there's, like, some situation that I could be wrong.
Well, have you had literally someone say that to you about iron?
Not to me. I just view the discussions that are going on Facebook, and I see people say that.
But that's truly silly, because iron is in hemoglobin.
Right.
If you didn't have iron in your hemoglobin, you wouldn't be alive. And the only people who have iron intolerances are people with hemosiderosis, and they damn well know it. So they're not going to, I mean, that's just so silly.
It also,
silly.
well, and this is, as we've discussed often, this is the internet problem of, you know, it drives me crazy to go on the various ceramics groups and have an infinite number of people play ceramic expert. And I appreciate everyone's experience. I appreciate that everyone wants to share what they believe they have learned. But, you know, and I come across as a terrible person, but I always say that the worst thing you can do is believe something that the wise old potter said because the wise old potter said it. That's wonderful that they've got experiential knowledge, but that doesn't mean they have realistic knowledge. It doesn't mean that they have the actual answer, and I have come across plenty of things that I have proven scientifically in my life that provide real answers to similar conditions. And Sue, you've been involved in some of them. You know, you've been involved in the pinholing discussions and sort of looking at ways of systematically looking at these problems versus just declaring an answer. And, you know, as to the pinholing discussion of that was a person perceived as an expert declaring that an answer because it was so, and then when you ask for proof, they literally have just links to websites that have no basis in reality. And the justification was literally, oh, well, but somebody put it on a website, which is nonsensical. I mean, literally, I shouldn't rant because we're being recorded, but this was the argument that we got into, that when I asked for sources, so this goes back to an argument that happened over the winter where Sue posted a question about a pinholing glaze, and the person that had published the glaze did not was not able to defend it. They had one explanation, and then when I questioned that explanation, they pointed me to a website, and I said, yeah, that website just says that this happens. Do you have proof that this happens? And all they said was, it's on the website. Don't you believe the website? And then they tried to make it like I was attacking the person that made the website. And I'm like, no, I just want the data. And they had no data. And they made a fool of themselves, but, you know, they're allowed to be an expert. And it's tiresome. You know, if somebody's got data, I will look at it, but all the experts. So the 10% iron, and the same thing of people will look at a recipe and they'll say, oh, that's got 30% barium. That's so much barium. How can you put that much barium? Except barium weighs 137 grams per mole. Okay, it's a massive molecule, so having 30% barium means literally nothing. It does not take the rest of the formula into account. It does not take the quality, the firing temperature, the conditions of the gloss into account at all. Okay, what's the other flux? What's the flux ratio? What's the temperature? Is it glassy? Is it well fired? All of these things are absolutely relevant. And for somebody to say 30% iron is, you can't have that. What are you talking about? That is literally preaching ignorance. And unfortunately, you know, I think the internet is a great place to have conversations, and it's a great place for people to declare themselves to be experts. And, you know, fine, you can call me another person declaring themselves to be an expert, but my bona fides are my bona fides, and my experience is my experience, and I think I represent a good side. And it makes me crazy. Sorry. Rant over. What was the actual question? Ezra, no, you may not pull my wires. Here, fire truck. Flashlight? What was the question, Sue?
I just want to know, I just want to have confidence that that it's true, because I don't have any real ways of verifying, like I don't have a gloss meter to do these tests myself, so I'm trusting that it's like that it works every time. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, yeah. It comes down to you know, at the end of the day, you do have to be responsible for your own formulas and your own firings. And the good news, and this sort of came up with what Phyllis was asking, I think, in the Hangout last week, of sort of, well, what do I do with this? How do I verify this? And, yeah, you don't have all of the testing and procedures, but something like what I was talking about in today's lecture. Yeah, today's lecture, okay, so the Kelly Justice problem, right? Of really all that came from, what, you want to snuggle? That the Kelly Justice problem, right? Has everybody watched yesterday's lecture?
Yeah.
Okay, so you know, it was looking for signposts, and sort of, you know, the question of what you can do with a lot of this knowledge is you can use it to understand what problems are, and then how to prove data in very simple ways. Okay, so Kelly comes to me with the glaze and says it's glossy when it's fired hotter, and to me, and hopefully to you guys, that's a warning sign. A glaze should never be, a matte glaze, I should say, should never be glossier when fired hotter. That doesn't happen. If you fire a matte glaze hotter, the one thing that it can do is run. Yes, he learned how to wave last week. Hi, are you waving? Yeah. Huh? Are you cute? Are you cute? So now you have that experience, and now you know that glossy should never be, or matte glazes should never be glossy. And so you can be aware of that, but then, you know, the way that I verified the quality of the result, she just saw us through the window. Sorry, he started whimpering. No, it's okay. I know. My wife's trying to harvest the garden before we leave, so I can take the veggies to my parents, and the baby's crying. So she's out harvesting at dusk. So with Kelly's, the transitions that I made were easy based on knowledge and experience, getting her boron levels up to prescribed levels, looking at her formula, seeing the shortcomings, the poor flux ratio, the fact that it was under boron, under representative boron content, and then making those changes. And the simple thing that I did to verify that result was to turn the matte glaze into a gloss. Okay, because that metric becomes very simple. If you have a glaze that is a matte glaze, and you want to determine that that is a true matte glaze, and you say, well, the numbers are good, the numbers make sense, but as I talked about in last Thursday's lecture, of that the matte line moves. That's not as rock solid at 5:1 as I may have implied in the past. So if the matte line can move, then maybe you want to go back and double verify that this is a true matte and that it's not just under fired. Well, there are two very simple ways to do it. One, fire it to a hotter temperature. That might take a whole other firing, so that's sort of a bummer. The second thing is just do a line blend, adding more silica to your glaze. Because what will happen is that it will go glossy, and that's exactly what I did to Kelly. Luckily, she wanted a gloss, but I just took her matte glaze, and all I did was add silica. I added silica that transitions you to the left on Stull, and you go from the absolute matte region to the absolute gloss region. And, and again, I've shown these before, but same glaze, matte, gloss, more silica, different colorants. And that's the important detail of knowing how to make that manipulation, and that verifies it. Because if you have a false matte glaze and you add more silica to it, it's just going to become drier. Because a false matte glaze is underfired, and if you add more silica to it, it's just going to become more underfired. Okay, so using this kind of thing, you can use it to verify the validity of your results. Now, some things do get a little bit sketchy. Sue, last week you were talking about, or was it on the message board? We were talking about how do you know you have too much silica in a glaze? I think that was on the message board. Right, we were talking about verifying thermal expansion, and how do you know you have too much silica?
Right.
The question then becomes, what is too much silica? And there is not an answer for that. Okay, that's the hard thing. There is not an answer for what is too much silica. In the final lecture of the course about low fire glazes, we'll talk about what happens when you have a lot of silica in a glaze, and that came up in the thermal expansion lecture last week. But that the short answer is, as long as the glass is melted, you can have a fair amount of silica until the texture begins to change. So if you've got a glaze that, say, is cone 10 but has an alumina level of 0.7, but is in a 7:1 ratio, right? So it should be glossy. I'll get to that in a second, Kevin. The glaze is most likely going to come across as somewhat dry. If it's described as a matte, I probably would not go with that description as a matte. I would just call it underfired. It's going to have the thermal expansion problems. It's going to have fit problems. It could very well lead towards shivering, but can you verify that result? Verifying the result is pretty easy. Move yourself around the map from that central point, and you can verify, is this result true? Is it really underfired? Take away silica and clay from that example, and if it becomes glossier, then yeah, it's probably underfired, because we know that Stull is a gradient, right? That it has transitions, and that goes back to the softening slides, where there was the second version of Stull where he had the softening points at cone 9 and cone 11. That it is a gradient as to what exactly is affected, but you can look at that with confidence and understand it. And again, that's what is so great about sort of where we are with the knowledge, because of the manipulations that I was able to do with Kelly, proving true mattes, proving high-end glosses at different temperatures, and as I talked about with cone 04, and it will come up again, that cone 04, the same rules apply. So again, if we've got these basic concepts, we can really start to manipulate them. And when we get to the end of the course, talking about low fire, that really a lot of the concepts that we've established actually go on to define things even like O4 sculpture glazes. Sculpture glazes are sort of crazy compositionally, crazy from a chemistry perspective, but actually we can look at them from our analytical viewpoint that we've developed and fully understand exactly what these glazes are doing. So to that end, it's beneficial, and now I've forgotten the question.
It's good.
Okay, good. Hold on, then. Let me go on a tangent. Kevin's asking, does the mass of an item affect the thermal expansion? Nope, not the mass, just the chemistry. Okay, and since we're really dealing with silicate systems, traditional glass is still a silicate system. Thermal expansion becomes an issue. Now, for traditional glass, we have the annealing problem. Okay, and the annealing problem is a thermal expansion problem as well. Okay, and that comes down to the fact that the exterior of a mass of glass cools very quickly. And we know that that's thermal expansion. Okay, it's going to thermally contract, which is the coming down from thermal expansion. So if I just take my spare mouse here, if this is a piece of glass, it's all very hot until you stop heating it. Well, then the outside cools very quickly, but the core is solid and retains that heat. So this begins to contract on the outside, whereas the inside doesn't. Its thermal expansion is still at, 1,000 degrees C, while the outside is already down to 500 degrees C. Well, those are two radically different levels of thermal expansion. So that's why glass blowers must anneal. Okay, because by annealing, what you do is you bring the temperature down slowly so that the core, the inside of the piece of glass, can have a similar thermal expansion to the exterior. Okay, it's not actually about the cooling per se. It's not that the cooling does something, but that the thermal expansion creates shock. Wow, my camera's going crazy. And so that's why we have to anneal. And in our clay and glazes, it's a similar condition. Because quartz has just these radically different conditions for thermal expansion. Okay, and it just goes back to pure quartz, incredibly high thermal expansion, 22 to 24, and then glass. I don't have a piece of glass, just straight up glass. I don't have my drinking glass tonight because I stopped making iced tea for the trip, so I have some styrofoam. Oh, Coke Zero. But so straight quartz has very high thermal expansion. Glass has very low thermal expansion, and so it's always dealing with the transition between the two. Even in, say, a blowing glass, it has different thermal expansions based on temperature, right? So if the temperature of the glass is high, the thermal expansion is X, and that comes down to the dilatometry data that we were looking at, right? Where, let me share this. Oh, hold on. I'm going to have to do this for a second. Oops. Cancel. Reduce. Increase. So, oops, except I got to pick the right lecture. So looking at the dilatometry data, right? So this is our dilatometer reading. And that because thermal expansion is theoretically linear, that the material keeps expanding at meters per degree. So literally every degree you go up. In the case of this clay, it's 4.8 times 10 to the negative 6 meters per degree. That's a real measured value. That is an actual distance it expands. And so for a blowing glass, if you have one, the exterior of your piece is at 1,000, say this was your expansion, then you've expanded this much, but then the interior, I should say the exterior is at 500, and then the interior is at 1,000. You've got these two radically different thermal expansions, and just like crazing happens, except your pieces shatter, they go straight through. Although one interesting thing I will say, that since we've got a glass person here with us, interesting thing, once you convert silica into glass, actually the quartz inversion doesn't happen anymore. Glass does not go through quartz inversion, only silica. Show. So thermal expansion becomes this totally tricky balancing act, and there is a place where you can balance thermal expansion between your clay and glazes, as we talked about in that lecture, that there is this region where they fit perfectly, and we see it all the time, and people associate it with industrial wear, but like this glaze has zero crazing in it. It's perfectly well fit. There's lots of ways to manipulate the glaze, talking about adding boron or changing or increasing your R2O that you just happen to get. God, my camera's really going crazy tonight, guys. I'm sorry. I don't know what it is. I've been thinking about switching out this camera, but I can't find a good substitute. The baby cursed it. There we go. Oh, I feel like Robin Williams in Deconstructing Harry. I love that movie. Come on. Okay, now slow. No. Stay, camera. Stay. Follow the finger. All the way up to my nose. Now, as long as I don't move anymore, which isn't going to happen, that the matching that thermal expansion can happen. But as we talked about in some of those slides, that you can take one glaze and fire it to 2 different temperatures and get 2 different thermal expansions because you're dissolving remaining quartz. Now, theoretically, in a glass batch, in a glass that you're working with, Kevin, that would it wouldn't happen because all that glass, all the quartz has theoretically been melted into the glass. For us, we're not necessarily that lucky because we're coming from raw quartz. We're only in the kiln for so long, we're only at peak temperature for so long, and our formulas are only so accurate. Now I have to stop waving my hands. I'm just going to sit here and twiddle my thumbs, not be expressive. Yeah, so thermal expansion becomes a real beast, but it's totally manageable. It's totally under control because it comes down to that the big problem is quartz and sodium. I mean, those are really the nasty beasts that you're dealing with. And if you can reduce unmelted quartz and reduce total sodium content, then it can help. Now, one thing I don't remember what I talked about in the lectures is actually the ROs also have an effect with thermal expansion, and it's actually reverse. So barium actually tends to have fairly high thermal expansion, and so a lot of the high gloss bariums that I'm such a fan of will often craze, which is a bummer. And I haven't found quite the answer for it yet, but something to work on later. Any other questions about thermal expansion? Oh, hold on one second. So the format of the midterm, it's all multiple choice. So you just point and choose. It's 19 questions and 1 sarcastic question, and it's all multiple choice. It should go up, I think, at midnight. So just try to read through my sarcastic answers. It's pretty much not mean. There are 2 phase diagram questions on there, though. So, yeah, you're gonna have to read a phase diagram.
Does it have to be done in all one go?
I don't think so. I think I said it that you can come back to it later. I know you can definitely. Yeah, you should be able to go back. Let me double check. I mean oh, that's good actually. I hadn't made the page visible. Show the link. There we go. Now it's on here. I'll move it up to the top. Edit test options. Let's see. The link will be available tonight at midnight. Allow unlimited attempts and multiple attempts. Yes. And there's no forced completion. So you should be able to do it in multiple sittings as many times as you need to get it right. Yeah. And it'll be up until, what's tomorrow, Wednesday? It'll be up till, oh, whoops, that date is wrong. It'll be up until Friday at midnight. And it'll grade it automatically, so you'll get your grade right away. Okay. Yep, so that's good to go. Okay. More questions? So Phyllis, were you going to ask a question, or was Sue going to ask a question?
I was going to ask, so quartz inversion, you say glass doesn't go through quartz inversion.
Mm-hmm.
But clay, the clay body goes through it every time you fire it? Like it doesn't convert and then like in the bisque firing it goes through it and then it again in the glaze firing it happens again? Okay, I wasn't sure.
Yeah, it's a problem because clay bodies generally never get rid of all of their quartz. Even a well-vitrified, well-fired clay, you don't want to get rid of your quartz. You want to be on the edge of all of your quartz being dissolved, but that's a common cause of slumping. Okay, is dissolving all your quartz, and then if the firing continues, your clay is forced to, or what happens is that the glass drops in viscosity, so the glass begins to flow and it slumps. That's one of the two major causes of slumping. So you really don't want to dissolve all your quartz. So whatever quartz is left in the clay body will continuously thermally expand, but the glass that you've created inside that body won't. And it's a lot of drama. Cone 10 in a clay body is very dramatic. And again, sort of, it's why it's not, if you're making sculpture, just don't work at high temperature, just work at low temperature. Because you save yourself a lot of that stress. But yeah, but once it's converted into glass, it's no longer quartz. And the same with mullite, theoretically, that mullite is an aluminosilicate, so it was never quartz to begin with. That in a clay body and a glaze, there is a fair amount of just straight up quartz. In our clay, we add quartz as an ingredient. There is free quartz in our clays and in our feldspars. Most of that gets dissolved into glass in the firing, but not all of it. Additionally, yes, you get quartz inversion on the bisque because you really don't form much glass at all. In quartz inversion, it's one of those things that I've talked about it many times. And if you take the clays class, it comes up a lot. But that it totally happens. It's totally not the problem that people make it out to be. If quartz inversion was a real issue, nothing would ever survive. That's just the math of it, because it is, and you can see it if I pull up that dilatometer reading. This is quartz inversion, right there, 573 degrees C. It turns on, and then that's it. Okay, right there. It's a minor shift. Yeah, it gets a little bit larger, but again, boom, it hits. And your clay, especially at such a low temperature, is not 573 across the whole firing, or across the whole piece, top to bottom. You've got different temperatures because kilns are radically uneven at 573 degrees C. So, it's not really a concern. Hopefully in your glazes you've gotten rid of it, but even if you haven't, yeah, it happens. It's puberty for ceramics. It's an awkward change that everybody goes through. Terrible, I know. Any more questions? Oh, good. I answered everything.
No, not quite. Those are just things that came up as you were lecturing in your videos. Oh, okay. Why don't you like lithium carbonate?
Because it's a carbonate. Because it's an alkaline metal carbonate.
It's an alkaline. Oh, yeah, that's right. But what problems does it create?
Well, it's water soluble, first of all, so it's not actually in your glaze. It travels with the water.
Into the bisque.
Into the bisque, but also it redeposits itself randomly on the surface of the glaze as it dries. Because as the water gets off, some of it gets left behind in the bisque, some of it gets left in the glaze, and a lot of it actually precipitates out on the surface, especially on high surface area parts of the pot. So, if you've got like edges, right? Edges dry really quickly, and so a lot of water will leave through the edge, so you can get deposits of lithium carbonate that are quite heavy on an edge, or soda ash or pearl ash. And so the chemistry inside the glaze is inherently not accurate, and then you're also changing the chemistry on the edges of the glaze, which can make things go matte, can make them go gloss. And I don't remember, did I tell the Philippe Bard story? Philippe was, I'm sure I tell it in the Clays class. Philippe was a visiting professor that we had at school a number of years ago. Swiss gentleman, I believe, makes this beautiful work where he casts really, really thick pieces of porcelain. So he takes molds and he sort of offsets them, and then he casts those into bowls, and he makes them really, really thick. So he casts them for days and days and days, and then he dries them for months. Okay, he came to Alfred 2008, I think, and he made this work. He was only there for a semester, so he cast all this stuff at the beginning of the semester, and he just let it dry all semester. Well, when he came to town, he was European. He didn't have a clay formula, so he said, somebody give me a casting slip formula. And he was given a high sodium casting slip. And so the sodium dissolved, because sodium is inherently water soluble, even sodium feldspar. The sodium dissolved and then transported itself into the body, and then when he glazed it, it retransferred itself onto the surface of the glaze, and his celadons that he thought were consistent celadons actually turned randomly crystallized. Because what had happened is that all that sodium had redeposited itself on the exterior of the glaze in fast, quick-drying areas. And it screwed all of his glazes. They completely changed because he's changing the chemistry regionally. He's changing the inherent flux ratio of his glaze regionally and randomly. Now, when we talk about low-temperature sculpture glazes, some people want that. Sometimes that's done on purpose. But, if you want control over your glazes, that's a very dangerous precedent to set. Man, he's really fighting it tonight. And so lithium carbonate enables that behavior from the start, because it transports, so it's no longer in the glaze, then it's in the body and on the surface, and it just creates problems. Now, some people like random, that's fine. I just wouldn't do it. Along with the fact that those areas become very high R2O concentrations, which again is not great for durability, not great for appearance, but sometimes that's what people want. But so yeah, lithium carb, soda ash, and pearl ash, the alkaline metal carbonates are just bad times. Was I really slandering lithium carb in these lectures this week? I forget.
Oh, it was. I take a separate set of notes for things that you say that I get intrigued with, that are probably incidental comments, ravings, rantings, whatever.
I don't do that.
Not you. And so, so that was probably one. The other one that I was intrigued with was, you had mentioned phosphorus, and then didn't mention it any further. So, and you were going to say something about it. So, can you give a preview of what you were going to say about it? And I'm assuming this is phosphorus from bone ash?
Yeah, primarily from bone ash, and I'm not going to say a damn thing about it because I would ruin Thursday's lecture.
Oh. No, you wouldn't.
Yes, I would, because Thursday we're going to talk about phase separation and crystallization, and how we use that as a special effect. The cool thing about phosphorus And let me see if I can pull up a periodic table real quick. The thing about phosphorus, periodic table poster, and as I even pull up my ceramics periodic table, is that phosphorus is right here next to silicon. Okay? And number 15. And red square, blue circle means it's a glass former, which means it will form a glass all on its own. Okay? Now, this is super cool because it will form a glass and induce this thing we call phase separation that I'm not really going to go into because we're going to talk about it all day on Thursday. But phase separation is a really cool property. It's a way to create really neat effects, and phosphorus is one of the number one ways to do it. Because what you're doing is you're forming a different type of glass inside your glass. And those are the phases that you are separating. And that's pretty cool if you ask me. Yeah, phosphorus, it primarily comes in the form of bone ash, but a lot of our materials do inherently just have phosphorus in them, especially the clays. And we'll talk about solving that as a glaze flaw. There is a glaze flaw, sort of, we call it ghosting. I've never actually seen a name for it, but where your clear gloss glazes get a little hazy. And we've pretty much traced it to phosphorus. And that's pretty cool. Yeah, so we'll talk about that on Thursday's lecture. Thursday, yeah, is a lot of fun. Crystals, phases. What's the other thing in there?
But no more phase diagrams, right?
Well, I mean, what do you mean by no more?
We don't like them.
You guys
just don't like them.
Chatting separately and conspiring against phase diagrams?
We just don't like them.
Oh, you just don't like them. I like them. They're very.
I know you do.
Come on, they're beautiful.
They are. They are like incredible topographical maps of Mount Rainier.
Yeah.
I just don't like them.
Oh, but they're so much fun. Hold on, wait. Now I have to go back and look and see, is there a phase diagram in this lecture?
Did you mention phase?
Oh.
The other thing, the other phase word, does that Kearsley borate too? Does that do that?
Phase separation?
Phase separation, thank you.
Yeah.
Great, another.
Oh my God, really? No, I know you, but him. I know. Well, put him down, let him exhaust himself. Just let him hang out in here, he'll be fine. He's really fighting it tonight. Phase separation, yes, is what happens in Kearsley borate, because Kearsley borate is inherently two materials, and they separate or they melt separately in the firing, so that you get the glaze thinks it's one thing, and then something else happens. I happen to think that I think that people overestimate the effect of Kearsley borate in phase separation. I think that people. Where did I put my raku glaze? I think that people attribute the appearance of raku to phase separation, and I think it's just raku. I think you just get random reduction in a raku glaze, and so it's. Hi, you. Hold on. Hi. You're standing up there. You know, so this is all one glaze, right, from a raku, but you've got this sort of reddish, you've got this greenish, and then there's sort of a metallic appearance over here. And it's just the way reduction happens. Like, yeah, is that a Kearsley borate-based glaze? Sure, but that's just localized reduction of copper. Okay, I'm on a timer. We got a baby terrorist here. That will all come up on Thursday, and then we can talk about it next week in the middle of the night.
Okay, I'm not seeing the boron map. Could you post that in the readings?
I think it's in documents.
Oh, okay.
Let me make sure.
Sorry. There's too many places to look anymore.
I know. Yeah.
My little old brain
it's,
gets
it's,
confused.
it's under documents.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. It's under UMF, boron, and temperature,
then,
all the way at the
oh,
bottom.
what a good place for it to be. All right,
Right.
thank you.
Yep. So, any other questions? Yes. Hello, baby on camera. Baby, grab microphone. Okay, you want to see yourself? You want to be impressed with you? Oh, Mama coming through the door. Come on, focus. Yes, Mama behind you. I know. Mama coming from the garden in the dark. Okay. Oh, now we're out of focus. You put us out of focus, Ezra. I know. This. So imagine 9 hours on a plane with this and an almost 5-year-old. It's going to be a fun weekend, everybody. Oh. And now my camera goes, oh. Who's that bashful baby? Who's this baby? Who's this baby? Who's a baby? You smile for everybody. Who's a baby? Who's a baby? You're a baby. Who left this baby here? Who left this baby? You're a baby. Anyway, any other questions before I flirt with the baby some more?
Have we decided on a time?
No. I guess 2 o'clock is probably what's going to work best, just because 2 o'clock for me, so normal meeting times. I mean, my only real alternative was trying to push it till 5 a.m., but since 5 a.m. European time, which would be 11 p.m. Eastern time, so that ends up really late for you guys. It's still super late, and so, you know, we'll do 2 o'clock next week, and we'll see. The week after might be a little bit tricky on top of that, but we'll do it 1 week at a time. Because the whole problem is what ends up happening is because it's a 6-hour time difference to the East Coast, and so like if we were to do 6 a.m., what will be 6 a.m. my time, it's midnight your time. We do 6 a.m. Eastern, that's 3 a.m. for the Pacific people. You do 6 a.m. Pacific people, and then that's 3 p.m. in Europe, and I'm gonna be out touristing. So then the only other alternative would be like a 6 p.m. in Europe, which ends up being 3 p.m. or noon Eastern time, and 9 a.m. Pacific. So that's the only other one I would say is 6 p.m. European time, noon East Coast, and 9 a.m. West Coast. It's probably the only alternative that I think would maybe work. But you guys, is that yes, no?
I could make that work.
You could do 9 a.m.
If it's better for other people.
Abby, Kevin, what are your schedules like?
I'd prefer something later at night or really early in the morning.
Right, yeah. Early in the morning doesn't work just because of the West Coast folks.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that makes you guys. Let's just try the normal meeting time this week. I'll be nice and in the dark, and I'll try to keep from waking up my 17 other family members. It's going to be a crazy house. Yeah, there are literally 18 of us going, including this one. So we'll see. Hopefully I've got a good internet connection. It may all fall apart. Nobody knows. An Airbnb in rural Holland. And then the week after, I'll actually be in Paris that week. So again, we'll have to play that one by ear, but we'll see how next week works, and we'll go from there. And hopefully, if I don't show up, I didn't wake up, and I apologize profusely, and we'll figure out another way to do it. But probably the baby will keep me up, so we'll see. Any other questions for this week? So the midterm will go up at midnight. It should just be. It's literally all multiple choice. You'll have to figure out the phase diagram stuff, but the answers are still multiple choice. So. Okay. Okay. So before this, what is this? Who's that? Ezra. Who's that? Who's that baby? Who's that? Ezra. Ezzy. Who's that baby? Oh. Who's that charming little boy? Hey. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Oz is a baby. Can you tell I spend all day just hanging out with the baby, talking to myself? Going to the park, having the moms not talk to me. Moms don't like stay-at-home dads. We're a threat. We're too cool for school.
You just living on the wrong coast?
I guess so. I don't know. I don't want to claim discrimination or have a woe is me party, but seriously, the moms do not talk to me. Now with the baby, they're a little bit better than it was just my older son. But yeah, they all have little cliques, and I've literally tried to join some groups and be told that I'm not welcome because I'm a man. Happened
That's
twice.
awful.
Yeah, happened twice.
How?
Well, the first time I was outright told I couldn't join. The second time I was told I could join, but they wanted to meet my wife. To which my response is, how many husbands are you asking to meet? And how do you know I don't have a husband? And how do you know my wife has not had some sort of tragic accident? Don't tell me you want to meet my wife. My children aren't welcome. Yeah, me and my boys go have our own cool time parties on our own. We go swimming? We go swimming tomorrow, Ezzy? Go float. He likes to float. You can't see his tan, but he's got a better tan than any of us. Sunscreen doesn't work on babies. Is that your blue steel? I was just serious, baby. It's my tip. Ezzy, it's my tip. You're not going to steal it. You're not going to play the game for everybody. You're just going to flirt like your brother. No, it's my Pip! He stole my Pip. All right, I'm going to go put this baby to bed, and everybody think of me from 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time until 1 a.m. as I fly across the Atlantic with this baby holding me hostage. I'm going to be that parent on the plane that everybody looks at and rolls their eyes when they see me coming. Baby on board. Yeah. All right, any other questions? All right, folks. Well, enjoy this week. We've got some fun stuff. We've got phases, phase separation, and crystallization on Thursday. And I think Monday is actually the iron lecture, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah, lots of fun stuff. Yeah? Oh, really? Oh, really? Yeah, and the midterm is up. I could even make it live now. Oh, he's going to grab that. Okay, never mind. Wait till midnight for the midterm.
Okay.
Everybody can take it tomorrow. I'm going to go try to, I don't know, be held hostage elsewhere. Okay, off to a dark bedroom with some lullabies playing. Say bye, Ezzy. Bye.
Bye.
Okay. See everybody next week.
Good night. Thanks, Matt.
Bye.
Night.